Hello, my name is Lauren and welcome to the Theoretical YouTube channel, where today we are answering a question that I have had for years. These are my favorite types of theory videos because we just start with a plot hole or an unexplained detail and then dig until everything clicks. So, with the most roundabout, unexpected, somewhat convoluted route possible, today we are answering the question: why did Barty Crouch Jr. turn his dad into a bone? Yeah, it's kind of a real deep cut theory today. But I swear, we have uncovered some evidence that could be a huge revelation for the Harry Potter franchise. And it all revolves around Barty Crouch Jr., Mad-Eye Moody, and the end of Goblet of Fire. So sit back, enjoy our intro, and get ready for one of our strangest theories yet. So yeah, as I mentioned in the intro to the intro, a Harry Potter plot hole that has bothered me for years is that after Barty Crouch Sr. approaches Harry Potter by the Forbidden Forest, Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, kills his father, but instead of destroying all the evidence completely, he turns the body into a single bone. Specifically, it's even part of his villain monologue that he buries this single bone outside of Hagrid's hut, which is by far one of the strangest plot holes to never be explained or addressed in the entire series. It's no wonder the movie just skipped this detail altogether. If you don't want a body to be found, then why would you bury a single bone in shallow earth outside the house of a man who was known to own a dog? It's just not very good planning from the villain who's supposed to be the mastermind behind Harry's fourth-year tragedies and Voldemort's best henchman. The only explanation that has ever made any sort of sense to me is that just a few chapters before the line about the bone, we learn that one of the ingredients in the potion that ultimately brings Voldemort back to life is the bone of the father unknowingly given.
Bone of the father unwillingly given?
So, maybe Barty Crouch Jr. was just making sure that if he ever needed to be brought back to life like his master, there would still be a bone from his father to do it. Yes, I think that is exactly what he's doing here. And the other ingredients required for the potion also line up fairly well with Barty Crouch Jr.'s actions in Goblet of Fire. He acquires and saves a bone of his father to be unknowingly taken. He has plenty of enemies that might apply to the blood of the enemy forcibly taken line.
Blood of the enemy forcibly taken.
In particular, he keeps his rival, Mad-Eye Moody, locked in a chest for the entire school year in order to harvest the Auror's DNA through hair for the Polyjuice potion. Is it really that outrageous to consider that he might also be taking some blood too? But the real good evidence comes from the third ingredient, flesh of the servant willingly sacrificed.
Flesh, the servant, willingly sacrificed.
And there's just not that many Harry Potter characters with servants so dedicated that they would be willing to cut off a limb on a whim. Except Barty Crouch Jr. has one. What a lucky coincidence! Again, if you only watch the Harry Potter movies, you might have missed this plot line altogether, but the Crouch family has a house elf named Winky. And Winky would do anything for the Crouches. Well, Dobby is this sort of weird anomaly in the house elf community because he enjoys his freedom. Winky is absolutely devastated when she's fired. Not to mention that Winky is ultimately freed because Barty Crouch Sr. knows that she helped cover for Barty Crouch Jr.'s escape at the Quidditch World Cup. And just how convenient that Winky then gets hired a few weeks later at Hogwarts at the exact same time that Barty Crouch Jr. is impersonating Mad-Eye Moody as a teacher. And even after being fired, Winky is still so loyal to Mr. Crouch, refusing to let anyone speak ill of the family name. She refuses to accept that neither of the two Barty Crouches are technically her master anymore. So if one day Barty Crouch Jr. happened to ask her to chop off a few fingers or two to help bring him back to life, she would 100% be a willing servant. In fact, if she hadn't been fired when she was asked for such a sacrifice, it wouldn't technically count as being willing, would it? It's only because she no longer works for the Crouches that her willingness as a servant to them would qualify her to be an ingredient in the potion. It is truly a testament to her dedication and the validity of this theory that even after being freed, Winky is still so dedicated to her masters that she would be willing to follow them by her own volition. Of course, this all hinges on the idea that if Barty Crouch Jr. had to come back to life, he could use the same potion as Voldemort did. Which is a complicated assumption because we cannot exactly know the function of that restoration potion and the circumstances in which it can be used. All we do know are the final 3 ingredients, and that it's a piece of old dark magic, and that Voldemort was able to use it to turn from this weird baby homunculus thing into a fully incarnate man again. Oddly enough, we know more about the method Voldemort used to turn himself from a soul fragment into the homunculus thing than we do about the final transformation. Combined with fresh squeezed snake milk from Nagini, Voldemort created his own spell that turned him into that weird, gross baby thing that Wormtail has to carry around for the whole book. But as for the restoration potion, it only ever appears in that one scene where Voldemort uses it to turn back into a fully human form. But I would like to argue that even though we don't technically know that the reason Voldemort was able to use that potion was because he had Horcruxes, it was totally because he had Horcruxes. For one thing, what's even the point of tethering your soul to the mortal world if you'll only ever exist as a soul fragment having to feed off of others for the rest of your life? So there has to be a known established way for someone with at least one Horcrux to return to their body after being killed. Something like an old piece of dark magic. One that Voldemort could have come across because he was studying Horcruxes in case he ever needed to use one. And you know who he approaches to learn about the creation of Horcruxes? No, I'm just kidding. Horace Slughorn, who the text tells us was Tom Riddle's favorite professor, but who was also the potions master at Hogwarts. And besides the initial act of murder to split the soul, J.K. Rowling has never revealed the full process it takes to create a Horcrux, claiming that it is too horrific to say. But perhaps it has something to do with potions. After all, Voldemort approaches a potions master to learn about Horcruxes, and then uses a potion to bring himself back to life. So certainly, Horcruxes are, in fact, linked to potions in the Harry Potter universe. So, if the restoration potion used in the Little Hangleton graveyard can only bring someone back to life if they also have a Horcrux, and Barty Crouch Jr. was preparing ingredients in case he ever needed to use it, does that mean that Barty Crouch Jr. also has a Horcrux? I mean, he doesn't die, and if the whole point of having a Horcrux is to ensure that you can't actually die, then that checks out. Again, the movies don't really care about the Crouch family storyline, but Barty Crouch Jr. is not actually killed at the end of Goblet of Fire. Instead, he is the only Harry Potter character we know of who receives the Dementor's kiss. In other words, he has his soul removed and devoured by a Dementor, but what if that was only part of his soul? I mean, Lupin says that you can, in fact, go on living without your soul. And what better way to dispose of a character from the narrative without revealing that he can't actually die because he has a Horcrux? It's not like Barty Crouch Jr. isn't the kind of evil wizard who would want a Horcrux in the first place. And he has definitely split his soul by killing before. At the very least, he killed his father. And he's incredibly smart, like got all 12 owls in his 5th year smart, not to mention that he is incredibly dedicated to the dark arts and to Voldemort, to the point where Voldemort trusted him enough to reveal how he was planning to return to a mortal body, which is information that might have led him to the conclusion that Horcruxes are a good idea, and how to create them. But of course, if we got this far, I want to know what the rest of the story is. If Barty Crouch Jr. has a Horcrux, what is it? And I think we found the perfect candidate. Mad-Eye Moody's eye. If there is any magical item related to Barty Crouch Jr. in this series, it's the eye he steals from Alastor Moody in Goblet of Fire. The magic eye he uses to impersonate the Auror for Harry's entire 4th year. And throughout the entire time, Barty Crouch Jr. is the absolute master of that eye. It works perfectly for him. You'd think that this super powerful magical object owned by the most paranoid character in the entire series would have some sort of security, right? But Crouch is able to use all of its powers effortlessly. He enhances images, looks through the back of his head, even sees through Harry's invisibility cloak, which I might remind you is a deathly hollow, which kind of means that the eye is more powerful than death, which is the point of a Horcrux anyway. Barty Crouch Jr. is able to use Mad-Eye Moody's eye so well that even after the original owner gets it back, it never works quite right for him again. Moody actually says it keeps sticking ever since that scum wore it after it gets stuck in his eye socket staring into nowhere. Even after cleaning it multiple times, Mad-Eye Moody's eye doesn't work that well for Mad-Eye Moody. Because it belonged to Barty Crouch Jr.? Because it belonged to Barty Crouch Jr. I think he put a little bit of his soul into that eye, and that's why it doesn't work quite as well for anyone else. Even after Alastor Moody is dead, the eye continues to be a plot device for the story. You'd think that falling hundreds of feet in the air, a height that ultimately kills Mad-Eye Moody, would also shatter his glass eye. But no. The eye somehow survives special Horcrux invincibility and somehow ends up in the hands of Dolores Umbridge. And then it was stolen by Harry Potter from Umbridge's office, while he was looking for a Horcrux in Umbridge's office at the same time.
What you looking?
What if he actually took the wrong one? But get this little piece of coincidental storytelling. After they do escape the Ministry, they start having a conversation about Horcruxes. And Harry is currently holding the locket in one hand and the eye in the other. Not to mention that the revulsion Harry feels when Hermione shows him Voldemort's Horcrux locket is directly mirrored by her reaction to seeing the eye. And this is the same chapter where Harry ultimately buries the eye in the woods where they're hiding. But do you remember where they started off their camping adventures? I quote, "In the woods where they held the Quidditch World Cup," said Hermione. "I wanted somewhere enclosed, undercover, and this was the first place you thought of," Harry finished for her. The last time Harry, Ron, and Hermione were in the woods by the Quidditch World Cup, Barty Crouch Jr. made his first appearance in the franchise.
More murder!
When he cast the Dark Mark into the sky and framed Winky, and then Barty Crouch Sr. fired his elf and allowed his son to escape, and set Barty Crouch Jr.'s plan in motion for the entire year. So then why? Why is this the first place Hermione thinks to apparate to in a panic? These woods have no real significance to her, but they mean everything to Barty Crouch Jr. And if his soul was traveling with them, wouldn't it make sense that it would lead them to this exact location? Because the eye in Harry's pocket is actually a Horcrux, which is why he spends his year at Hogwarts collecting ingredients for his own restoration potion, which is why Barty Crouch Jr. turns his father into a bone. I mean, this theory just fits, you know? And the fact that Harry buries the eye underneath a tree in the woods where Barty Crouch Jr. set up the Dark Mark from behind a tree, it's not quite perfect, but pretty close. And then could this be confirmation that there is more than one Harry Potter character with a Horcrux? That would seriously be a huge revelation about the lore of the Harry Potter franchise. I really like this theory. And if you liked it too, feel free to subscribe to this channel for new Harry Potter content all the time. And you can follow us on Twitter at theory_central. Obviously the best Twitter handle in the world. Obviously. So thanks for watching. Please don't turn your parents into bones. Please. And we'll see you later.
This is all hypothetical, isn't it, Tom? All academic.
Of course, sir.